Everyone's got a story. What's yours? We all live in stories, and we all live on stories. Stories of quests for truth and seeking to right wrongs. Stories of fearsome monsters and facing up to them together. Stories of our lives and stories of this world we live in. Is your story a hopeful story? We think it can be.
Hi everyone and welcome to Story. This is our very first event, so it's a great pleasure to welcome you tonight. What story, you may ask? Well, Story is a series of 7 events over the next 2 weeks, exploring who we are, how the world works, and uncovering how that connects to our Christian faith and the person of Jesus. Now, you don't have to be an English student to engage with Story. We all have stories to tell. And from the things we watch, read, and listen to, they tell stories too. When we take a step back, we can notice that some stories are particularly powerful and fundamental to the ways we think and feel. We have chosen 4 basic plotlines to explore over the next 2 weeks. And if you look at storycambridge.uk, you can see what's coming up. I should probably introduce myself. Hi, I'm Ifa. I'm a 3rd year medical student at Robinson College. And even though as a medic, I probably pick up a book once a year. I do love a good story, in video form of course. And I'll be walking you through tonight's story. As we kick up the series tonight, we're going to be thinking about the quest, the thing that unites the Lord of the Rings, Finding Nemo, and the Iliad. We are going to think about what drives us on. What is it we're searching for? Will we ever be satisfied? And what do our deepest desires tell us about reality? Helping us to think about this is Pete Dray. Pete is based in Leeds, but works with university Christian unions all across the country, so he's familiar with the student world. He also loves to read and finds stories fascinating, so we're in safe hands. Pete will spend about 25 minutes helping us to think about this question of whether or not our quest for something more can ever be satisfied. But before he does that, I'm going to hand over to Abby. Earlier, Abby sat down with Rahil Patel, a former Hindu priest, to hear what the pursuit of something more has meant in his life. I hope you'll be inspired by his story.
Hi Rahil, it's a great pleasure to get to talk to you like this. Where are you at the moment?
I'm in Oxford. Hi Abby, nice to see you. And well, I can't see everyone in Cambridge, but it's good to be with you guys in Cambridge. I'm in Oxford, just north of Oxford, and it's great to be here.
Great. As we get started, perhaps you could tell us a bit about yourself. So you were brought up in London, I understand?
I was brought up in London. My family, well, I'm from India, from Gujarat, which is a state in the northwestern part of India. Most of the Asian Indians in the UK are from that state. We came to the UK in the 50s and 60s via East Africa. So my parents were born in Kenya, but then they moved here. I was raised in London, in northwest London.
Was your family traditional Hindu?
Yeah, my family were all traditional classical Orthodox Hindus. We had a dedicated room in our house for the house shrine where we actually kept the images of the gods that we worshipped. And it was a norm. Every morning when you wake up, you have a bath, you have a personal prayer kit. Everybody in the family had a personal prayer kit where we had the images of the gods we were worshipping. We'd spend 20 minutes praying, worshipping. Then we would go downstairs into the house shrine and we'd pray and worship there for a good 20 minutes as well. And then we would have breakfast. Before all of that, you are not even allowed to have a drop of water. So that was the morning routine. And then off to school. When you're back from school, you wash your hands and face and go into the house shrine, pay your respects, and then you sort of do your homework. Then mum and dad comes home. And then just before dinner, the whole family congregate in the house shrine and we worship for another 20, 30 minutes. And then we eat together as a family. And then, you know, we watch TV or people do their own thing. But then before bed, once again, for 40 minutes, we get together in the house shrine, we pray, and then we go to bed. So this was the home routine in traditional Indian families.
I understand as a teenager, you ended up becoming more involved at the temple.
So, got more and more involved. I think the weekends played a big role in my life, spending sometimes the whole day at the temple with friends. But while I was in my early teens, I was drawn to the idea of God more and more, the pursuit of God for something more, you know, something more fulfilling. My parents were, you know, financially very stable. We had very good, you know, things at our disposal. But I just had this fascination about God. And at the age of 16, I was then given the responsibilities to head the youth within the temple in North London, which was fun. You know, we learned scriptures by heart. We sort of did cleaning in the temple. We worshipped in front of the images on the weekends together. And then we also played football as well. You know, we played table tennis or cricket. So life, you know, was gravitating around that sort of worldview more and more. And I got more and more involved to the extent where in 1988, when the guru of this particular denomination that we were following came to London, I was asked to speak in the congregation.
What did you believe at this particular point then?
At this particular point, we believed that the guru was the incarnation of God on earth, the guru that was alive, traveling, based in India, but he was traveling all over the world. And we worshipped him as God on earth. We believed him to be God. Whatever he said was from God. And so we believed that he was the vessel of God on earth, and that God never leaves the earth and he's always incarnating through another guru. So for this global denomination, it was a big thing when he comes to their country or their city. So he was in London and I gave a talk on an ancient Hindu scripture in the congregation. And he was very enthralled by the talk. I went to him for blessings afterwards. That's the tradition. Once you give your talk, you don't just receive all the applause and sit down. You go to the guru and you bow at his feet and you take his blessings. And at that point, he said, look, you know what? You've got a very good gift of speaking. I think you should be a priest, a monk. And for me, I was like over the moon, because my goodness, that's God asking me something, you know. So in that instant, I was 16. It was April the 3rd, 1988. And I just thought, that's my destiny fixed. I had a sense of purpose, you know, I had a sense of meaning. I'm going to go and pursue God in a deeper way. And I just had this idea that I'm going to be really fulfilled and I'm going to be enjoying, and every day is going to be like the weekends that I've had in the temple. You know, that's what I had in mind, you know, because when you're worshiping, it's just fun. And we'll all be together with friends. There was a cohort, you know. I said yes straight away.
And how did your parents, did they feel happy about that? Or?
They were not happy at all because the vows of detachment as a monk in this denomination were very strict. First and foremost, you don't get married. The celibacy vows were very strict. Not only do you not get married, you're not even allowed to talk to a woman or intentionally look at a woman. Whenever you're traveling internationally, there are always people from the congregation traveling with you so you can make it through airports. So that's the first thing, you know, especially for an Indian family, there's no lineage. The second, you're not paid, you know. Not only that, you're not even allowed to touch money. If you touch money accidentally, you have to wash your hands 25 times. So complete detachment. Everything's looked after for you by the organization. Nothing is yours. And the third thing is you can never, ever talk to your parents or meet them ever again. So the vows of detachment from the world were very extreme, but for people in that denomination, it was very normal. It was very normal. But they were obviously not so happy. But I was quite adamant. I was radical. I really wanted this. I wanted God in my life. And so after my A-levels, I left for the monastery in India.
And at this point, you'd been to a school where Christianity was spoken about. Had you thought about Jesus much at that point?
Well, I'll be honest, I really did enjoy singing the hymns in school. Our Father who art in heaven, we used to sing that. There was a tune to that. I loved that. I used to sing that at home. You know, I never thought of, as a child, I never thought of it as different. Oh no, I'm not allowed. You know, my mum never stopped me if I sang Our Father who art in heaven at home while I'm playing with my toys. But I did love that. I loved the hymns. I loved Christmas time, especially. We did celebrate Christmas at home in our own way. We had a tree, but we would have our own food and we'd do things in our own way. But, you know, I didn't really have a personal affiliation with the personhood of Jesus, but I really liked the traditions. And from school, we also went to various churches, which were just beautiful, just sitting there. You know, we had to draw certain aspects of the church as part of our, you know, classwork as in primary school. I remember that still today. I remember that. So those beautiful moments have etched into my being in a profound way, even though there wasn't a sort of connection with the person of Jesus, but the traditions and aspects and the art of Christianity were very, you know, attractive.
And did that carry on, that kind of intrigue with Christian art and the building?
Well, later on in life, because I trained in the monastery for 6 years, so that's very vigorous. You wake up at 4:45 in the morning, you have a cold water bath. You're not allowed to use warm water. You meditate for 45 minutes. You then all get together in the temple and you worship for another 45 minutes. Then you do chores. Then it's academia all day from about 9 o'clock till 11 p.m. at night. It's just study, one class after the other. It's really vigorous. You get about 2-3 hours of homework. So from 8:30, the first lecture starts and you've got to write notes and you have a 3-hour paper on that every 2 weeks. Then other classes start, different denominations of Hinduism, different philosophies and doctrines, world religions. So, you know, my initial first month was just amazing. I just loved it. I swallowed everything in the training. And then one day I was prostrating upstairs in the temple and there were 150 of us bowing to the images. The tradition is called Arti, where you wave the lamp. It's just like a candle. You wave it in front of the images. It's a 20-30 minutes ceremony every day. And so the bells were like beating and the bells were, you know, just ringing and there's just all this singing going on. And suddenly I heard this voice in my left ear. It wasn't audible, but it was a question. And it asked me, are you in the right place? Have you made the right decision? And I just stopped bowing to the images and I walked to the side of the temple. I still remember this today vividly. It was a 3-story temple and I was looking over the sort of balcony. I thought, goodness, what have I done? You know, where am I? I don't know, something just shook me. But like the Christian faith, the Hindu faith has a version of Satan and it's called Maya. So I just thought, well, must be just Maya, you know, stopping me. And so I just suppressed it. But from that day, certain doubts took place in my life.
Mm.
Based on that, later on in my life, when I was struggling as a priest, I had been ordained. I was given the charge of Europe and Russia. So I had about 1,600 people under me, and I had a team of 150 people operating Europe. Europe was very barren. We had a huge congregation in the UK, USA, East Africa, South Africa, Middle East, and so on. But Europe was completely empty. So I worked really hard there. And that's where I came back into contact with the artistic side of Christianity, because Europe has many, many churches. Yeah.
What in particular, whereabouts, like which were your favorite?
Well, it started in an interesting way, because I was given the charge of Europe in 1997 after my training. By this time, I had 2-3 different struggles. I did have doubts about this faith. The first and foremost was that if you're pursuing God, there would be some inner transformation, you know. We were fasting 5 to 7 times a month. That's 36 hours without food and water in 45 degrees Celsius. We were chanting and meditating several hours a day. You know, we were not sleeping that much. We were studying hard. I mean, in terms of rituals and rules and regulations, we were doing like everything and anything that's possible. So I questioned the guru once, and I said, I'm looking at these priests who have been priests for 30, 40 years, but I don't see a change here. Externally, everything looks very holy, very religious, and very disciplined, but I just don't see an inner change, you know, that inner joy, that deep peace. As a monk, I was always questioning why Westerners are seeking answers in the East. You know, I found it bizarre, because here we were doing all of this and not having that deep peace. And that's the question I asked the guru. Anyway, my questions were getting a bit too much for him. And he sent me and gave me this big role in Europe. So I got excited. I thought, okay, great, you know, make a mark here. So I started traveling across 18 different countries in Europe. I was on a plane once a week, doing about 60 to 90,000 miles a year, traveling, building temples. I built a temple in Portugal, in France, in Belgium, and then other centers across Europe. And you have to do a lot of in-depth work to build these temples. You have to make connections with ambassadors, with politicians, with NGOs. So I helped the organization get affiliated with the United Nations in Geneva and Vienna. Then we established good networks with Indian ambassadors in these countries, British ambassadors in those countries, and various NGOs. So initially, you know, my career was quite, if you wanted to give it a worldly name, is quite successful. You know, you're traveling on first class on British Airways. When as soon as your car arrives at the terminal, the British Airways staff come out of the airport to collect you and take you straight into the lounge. And you're at your destination. And as soon as you're at your destination, British Airways staff are at the, you know, door of the plane, ready to take you straight to your car again. So it had all of that. You know, you have thousands worshiping you, you know, literally bowing at your feet, looking to you for answers to the questions of life. And here I was, you know, still in doubt myself. And it's just bizarre, because if you wear orange clothes and you shave your head and you have some vigorous rules about you, people assume that you've got all the answers. And you can easily control people like that as well. I asked my congregation in Norway once, I said, do you believe everything I tell you? They said, well, you're not married, you don't get paid, you've given up everything, you must be telling the truth. And I thought, that's just bizarre, you know. Appearances doesn't mean that you're telling truth, you know. So I did about 400 trips across Europe in my 15 years looking after that region. And slowly I started building a small congregation in Rome. We only had about 2 families, about 9 people. But on my first visit to Rome, the guys there took me to the Sistine Chapel. And it was a really interesting scenario. As you may know, the Vatican is packed with people. And for us, our vows of celibacy is very difficult to go into the Sistine Chapel, because if a woman accidentally touches you, you have to fast for 36 hours. It's not her fault, but you have to do that. So the Swiss guards gave me a seat under the painting of the Last Judgment, ironically. And it was all secure, and I had a place to myself. And I remember this vividly. I was just sitting there looking at all these people just in awe of the art. And I looked up. The ceiling's by Michelangelo, but the side paintings are by Botticelli. And on the left-hand side from where I was sitting, the stories of Jesus were there. I didn't remember any of them, from school. But I remember saying to myself, gosh, this just makes sense. I actually said that to myself. And I was in my orange robes. And I thought, what have I just said? Luckily, no one heard me. None of my colleagues heard me. I went upstairs and, there's the beautiful Pieta by Michelangelo with Jesus on the lap of Mary. And I was just so drawn to that. It wasn't so much the art or the sculpture itself, although that is beautiful. There was something just very attractive beyond that. And there it did slip my tongue, I said to my colleague, I'd love a poster of that on the back of my office door. And he just looked at me and thought, are you serious? And I quickly just, retracted my request from that. But this happened quite frequently. I was super busy growing the organization. I was invited to America to speak there. I spent a good 5 years in terms of travel, cumulative travel there. And my questions were still there. My doubts were there. That deep satisfaction of God. Does God know me? I'm doing all this to please him, all these rituals, all this meditation, this fasting, looking after hundreds of people. We were never given weekends, like vicars have a Sabbath day or a day off. We never had a weekend. You're off when you're asleep. Otherwise, you're available until 11, 12 o'clock at night. Sometimes meetings go till 1, 2 in the morning. You're always looking after the people and their problems, helping them get through life. So that's, why I suddenly got drawn to these images and the artistry of Christianity while I was a priest. And that was a struggle, actually.
Sadly, we're running out of time a bit, but we've got to this point where you have lots of doubts, but you're also very busy and not able to think about them and have kind of encountered some of Christianity. What then happened to get to a point where your convictions changed? And
well, I'll just highlight one thing. My health really deteriorated. I was in and out of hospitals. I was traveling extensively. Things were growing. Things were successful. It was a very high-profile life. Meeting, met various UK prime ministers. You meet the president of the European Union. I arranged a meeting with the president of Portugal, with our guru. You meet famous celebrities in this role, both from India and the West, So, and the work was growing. The work was really growing. But my questions, my doubts, this sense of fulfillment was not there. This was empty. This was a vacuum, to put it boldly and bluntly. And so my health got so bad by 2010, I found out of a clinic in America, which my doctors in London sent me to. It's the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. I was there for 10 months. And then, in those 10 months, I was forced to rest. You can't travel, because busyness is a good way to bury your trauma and your challenges. So I didn't have much to do there. So what was sort of churning here was beginning to articulate here. Anyway, after the 10 months was over, I came back to London. My medication has decreased because before I went to the clinic, I was on about 40 different tablets a day, various Ayurveda, allopathic medicine, homeopathy, and so on. It was just crazy. It was just crazy stuff happening in my body. I came back to London. I was off a lot of the meds. And then I thought, let me go back to India and just see my guru, because I was still, in this mindset that this is where I'm going to end up for the rest of my life. He was still my guru, and I still had to push the idea that he's God, even though I was very doubtful myself. But by that time, something had happened, and, my theology had changed slightly over the 15 years, my Hindu theology. I had a different idea of God, a God that's much bigger than a temple or an image in a temple or a guru, a God that's broader, And this started coming out in my speeches, and I didn't know, but people actually loved it. I could just give you a quick example. In Orlando, I gave the keynote speech at the National Convention there. There were about 8,000 people. And I was given a Hindu verse. But when I gave the 10-minute speech, it was completely different and based upon my experiences within the churches that I'd visited. It was slightly, and I got a standing ovation, And I sat down next to my friend, who's a priest, also from London, a former dentist. He said to me, gosh, how did you interpret that verse like that? It was just fascinating. And I didn't even say anything. I said to myself, gosh, only if you knew. It had nothing to do with the Hindu doctrine that we're believing here. Anyway, that sort of happened quite frequently, naturally, without me knowing. So by the time I got back to Mumbai, there was a big issue at the very senior level of the organization about my doctrine, my theology, because I had a lot of influence when I spoke. Wherever I traveled, thousands would get together and want to listen to me. So long story short, that meeting didn't go well. And in 2011, on December 27th, I left the monkhood, came back into civilian clothes, and came back to London. A friend initially put me up in his hotel in South Kensington. There were sort of strict conditions on my departure. I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone in the 20 years that I met and looked after, and no one was allowed to talk to me, which I sort of intellectually knew that that's typical, as harsh as it sounds. And so I was quite disappointed by my life at that stage. I was 40. I had really done my best pursuing God. Gosh, I had done a 2,000-mile pilgrimage across India, all the way from the west to the east. I bathed in the Ganges. I went to the birthplace of Rama, the Krishna. I climbed sacred mountains 3 times. That's like 10,000 steps. You have to start at 8 in the morning, come back at 5. So I thought I'll have a spiritual idea about me, but the idea of God, I just sort of mentally gave that up, after pursuing it for 20 plus years. And then around 2 weeks into Jan, I was going to the station, the railway station, and I was pretty focused just looking ahead, and suddenly my head turned, to the right. And I saw this beautiful church down this quiet road. And I thought, okay, look, let's go and have a look. It may have the paintings like the ones in Rome, like Botticelli. And I didn't know that you can also get some very bland looking churches, because the ones in Europe are all laden with gold and marble and onyx and all the rest of it. So I thought, let's have a look. It was a Sunday morning around 11:15, and I went down that road and I came to the entrance, and there were 2 people standing there welcoming people in, which I thought was very weird. I didn't have that in the Vatican, But these 2 individuals had these incredible smiles, It was just, this love was oozing off them, and it was really creepy kind of thing. I'd never seen that kind of love before, or felt it. Anyway, they welcomed me in. As soon as I went through the main doors, the presence of God just fell on me with this incredible blanket of peace. And those words, 20 years later, came back to me again and whispered, "You're home." And that was it. Again, it wasn't audible, but that, that sense that someone has just said something to you, "You're home." I walked inside the church. It was packed with people. So I went upstairs and I sat in the pew, and I'd never seen worship on guitars and drums and smoke machines. Goodness, I had never seen all of that. How can that be worship? But it was just wonderful. It was beautiful. I had this joy. The sermon made sense. I didn't go down and tell anyone who I was or where I was from. I went back to the hotel. I sat on the corner of the bed. The manager of that hotel took me to that room just a year ago. I sat on the corner of the bed and I gave my life to Christ in that instant, which was fascinating for me because as a monk, as a priest, to convince me about something was very difficult. To debate with me was a no-go area. They would have certain board meetings whilst I was in Europe because they knew that if I would be there, I would change the course of the meeting if I didn't agree. So to really convince me in a debate or discussion was sort of next to super difficult. And here, nobody preached to me. Nobody gave me a lecture. I just knew that Jesus is alive. This is a living God, in that instant, that this is not just an idea. It's a reality. That's what happened then, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I imagine there'll be some people watching and tuning in who probably have similar doubts and questions. What would you say to them?
Questions are genuine. Don't ignore the questions that you have. Don't ignore the promptings that God might be giving you. I mean, for me, it took me 20 years. Looking back at times, I think, I wish I had listened earlier, So if you have these questions, pursue them. If you sense a prompting or an attraction to certain Christian traditions, the artistry or the church setting or the choir or whatever it is, pay attention to that, those subtleties, because that's a prompting from God.
Thank you so much, Rahil. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today.
Likewise, thank you for your time and thanks for inviting me.
Then he said to them all,
"Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self?"
Well, good evening. Let me add my welcome to Story Cambridge. My name is Peter Dray. I'm one of the speakers at these evening events, and whilst I would love to be with you all in Cambridge, it'd be much more fun for all of us. I'm thrilled to play a part nonetheless. Across Story, we are going to be celebrating the best in human stories, our own stories, the stories of some of our special guests, and more broadly, those stories that have inspired us, which have changed the way we think, and which have brought us closer to the truth and each other. What I want to say is this, though: whilst it's tempting to think that the best stories are just there to entertain us, stories actually do something much deeper. That's the premise of this fortnight. Meaning doesn't just leap out at us through life's occurrences. As much as we would like them to, our experiences don't come with labels attached. To be human, then, is to be a storyteller, to arrange experiences, to look for patterns. Each of us is continually finessing our own story to make sense of meaning and identity. Now, during story, you'll find there are two streams of events. The amazing Rebecca McLaughlin will respond to some of the charges that are directly made against the Christian story, which cause people to think it's undesirable or simply implausible. The inspiration for the events that I'm speaking at is Christopher Booker's magnum opus, The 7 Basic Plot. It is a thick book. He spent 34 years writing it, but Booker's central observation is simple, that across time and cultures, the same plot lines keep re-emerging to our stories. These plot lines are launching points for an almost infinite numbers of variations, twists and turns, which is why we don't get bored of stories. And yet, says Booker, beneath all of these variations, the same structures remain. It's an intriguing thought, isn't it? And one we're going to dig into during the evenings I'm speaking at. Now, I do want to say that invariably Booker's thesis has been challenged. Some think that there are more or less than 7 basic plots. Some question his conclusions. Others even question the basic premises upon which he reasons. But to my layman's eyes, it's undoubtedly true that Booker has hit upon something real when he describes these families of plot lines. And further, I believe that these recurring story forms reveal something not just about our deep psychology, but the very reality in which we tell these stories. So here's where we're going. In the coming evenings, we're going to consider 4 of Booker's 7 basic plots. And we're going to ponder together what they reveal. Now, I'm going to lay my cards on the table and tell you, I believe that the reality that they reveal is Christian reality. That these reoccurring plots indicate to us the resonance of the Christian account with reality, rendering the Christian story the true account that we long for. That's where we're going. Tonight, we're just going to think about quest stories. What are quest stories? It's Frodo taking the ring from the Shire to Mordor. It's Harry Potter searching for Horcruxes to foil Voldemort. It's Dorothy following the yellow brick road to the Emerald City. It's Jason Bourne following the evidence trail to find out who he really is. It's Catherine Granger hunting down Olympic gold after 3 successive silvers. It's Doreen Lawrence's relentless pursuit of justice for black schoolboys in memory of her murdered son, Stephen. It's Oxford mathematicians, embarking upon decades of effort to prove Fermat's last theorem. Perhaps it's also the story upon which you embarked the path that ultimately led to Cambridge. Now, let me draw out 4 characteristics of these quest stories. First, in each of them, there is what Christopher Booker calls the call. In other words, a protagonist becomes aware that something is wrong, which they have to set right. Or an opportunity presents itself that the protagonist knows they simply cannot pass up, that whilst it's risky for them to leave, they simply can't stay. Secondly, in quests, there are always companions involved. Frodo would have never made it to Mount Doom without Sam. Harry needed Hermione and Ron and the Order of the Phoenix. Catherine Granger tells of rousing coaches and the encouragement of her next-door neighbours and, of course, other rowers in the boat. Your own story of coming to Cambridge will involve supporting characters, perhaps family members or inspirational teachers. Third, the quest journey is always perilous. External enemies threaten the quest. That might be an orc or a sporting injury or a powerful stakeholder. There are distractions that divert the protagonist's attention, but nearly always the protagonist's main threat is internal to them. In other words, a point comes when they think they simply can't go on. The journey is too hard, too discouraging, too painful. Occasionally, it's at this point that they turn around and head home. But as those hearing their stories, we recognise they are betraying their call. And more often in the best quest stories, having been driven to question their deep desires, the protagonists grittily resolve to head onward. A final recurring characteristic is a goal. The treasure is found, the world is saved, the medal is won, and the protagonist tastes glory. But very often in these stories, the journey proves as important as the goal itself. Do you remember the scarecrow wanted brains, the Tin Man wanted a heart, and the lion wanted courage? In the end, the Wizard of Oz proved disappointing, but these characters had found these things along the way, on the journey, on the yellow brick road. So why do we tell stories of quest? Here are a couple of thoughts. First, I think, don't quest stories reveal that we are desiring beings? It's our desires that prevent us from just sitting in a status quo. And our desires are a bit like the call that stirs protagonists to action in quest stories. Indeed, I think it's fair to say that quest stories show the kind of hedonistic vision of life to be a lie. We all know that life is more than just the mere satisfaction of our shallowest instincts, that true life must meaningfully engage our deeper desires. And so quest stories, I think, underscore the reality that, as someone put it, to be human is to be on the move, pursuing something, after something. As existential sharks, we have to move to live. Second, quest stories resonate with our intuition that there are aspects of our personhood which can only emerge when we're on a quest, even especially if the quest pushes us to our limits. In other words, quest stories suggest that we learn most about ourselves and about the world not by staying at home and reflecting on our feelings, but as a corollary of pursuing a goal that engages our entire person. Quest stories encourage us to find our missing parts by going on a journey, echoing our search for what the philosopher Clifford Williams calls enlarged life. Notice, for example, how you respond to the famous advert taken out by Ernest Shackleton, the polar explorer, back in 1900. Shackleton's advert apparently read, "Men wanted. For hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful." Now, I wonder how you respond to that beyond the gendered language. Part of you probably balks at the language of going, of the thought of going. But isn't another part of you drawn to Shackleton's quest? These desires for glory, for enlarged life, for what's dormant in us to be woken up, are universal. Now, some choose to explain these desires naturalistically. They emphasize that many human desires point to natural ends, to food or sex or community. And they label our desires which can't be naturally satiated as merely unfortunate side effects of our evolutionary psychology, promising much to us but delivering nothing. The Christian story, let me say, offers an alternative account of our desires, and one which I believe is much truer to experience. Christianity posits that all of our desires are given to draw us into the relationships that we were made for, with ourselves and our well-being, with one another, with the world, and ultimately for life with our Creator. Now, during story, we're using Luke's Gospel, one of the biographies of Jesus, to explore these claims. And tonight, we're going to dip into chapter 9. For there, Luke uses the very language of quest to describe what Jesus is all about. In verse 23 of Luke chapter 9, Jesus issues his call. He says this, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Now, I know, according to the Vicar of Dibley stereotype, following Jesus is the opposite of embarking upon a quest. Particularly if you're British, I think, Christianity is portrayed as being a kind of middle-class, middle Britain, middle-of-the-road kind of thing. Notice how different Jesus' call is here. It's as if he's shaking us up and Shackleton-like saying, "Come with me, we're going on an adventure. It's going to be tough." And along the way, you might even get killed. Indeed, Jesus' call demonstrates how all-consuming his quest will be for those who will follow. Jesus says it will mean denying ourselves. He doesn't mean denying things to ourselves, like giving up chocolate for Lent. It's much more radical. Jesus is saying it will require denying our very selves. Now, this doesn't instinctively sound very attractive, does it? But according to Jesus, the reason that the world is in such a mess is because we keep saying yes to self. And self says, I want my own way. I want to do what I want to do. Self says, I want that person to build their life around me. Self says, I want people to adore me. I want people to think I'm great. And according to Jesus, it's humanity saying yes to self that's led the world into such deep pain. It's not only led to unjust trade regimes and despotic politicians, but an insta-culture in which we all cry out to be noticed, all the while blind to the needs of others. Jesus says, if you're with me on my quest, self is to no longer be in charge. I am to be in charge. Notice then that following Jesus isn't about adding him to what you are already doing. His quest requires turning round and giving your entire life to him, saying to him in every detail, Jesus, your will be done. Jesus is saying, if you're joining me on my quest, I need your life. And that's reinforced by what Jesus says next. We're to take up our crosses daily. Do you know, in Jesus' day, the only reason you'd ever take up a cross is if you were on your way to being crucified. So Jesus is saying, if you're to come after me, it won't be safe. You need to be ready to be rejected, perhaps even to die. And the call is crystallized in his final phrase, follow me. What does it mean to follow Jesus? Well, in part, Jesus means following his pattern of life, loving, caring, doing justice, contending for the vulnerable. I mean, that might already seem an almighty task, but Jesus is implying even more. For where did committing to this pattern of life take Jesus? Well, it led him to being misunderstood, betrayed, mistreated, and ultimately killed. And because the quest that we're called upon is about following Jesus wherever he goes, that makes the Christian life inevitably costly. It might cause your family to disown you. You might miss out on your dream job. In some parts of the world, you might even be thrown into prison. You may well be thinking, well, if story is about persuading people to consider Jesus, tonight is going spectacularly badly. Because why should I follow Jesus if it's going to be so hard? But remember what quest stories whisper to us, that the only way to fullness of life and the only way to discover the fuller truth of who we are is first to leave home and to get lost in the woods. Because it's only when we give our lives to first pursuing a bigger cause than ourselves that we can actually find life. Yes, there are two-dimensional stories that are out there, where somebody perhaps attaches themselves to a small goal, maybe just to good money or just to a respectable career, but which don't stretch them, in which they never grow. There's a reason why these stories aren't very popular to tell or very compelling to hear. We all know that it's only in pursuit of a cause much bigger than ourselves that we find that true life is thrown in. Listen to how Jesus puts it in verse 24. For whoever wants to save their life, he says, will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will save it. It's as if Jesus is saying, yes, I know there are plenty of other quests you could give yourself to. Maybe to add to the sum total of human knowledge in your given discipline, or to excel at sport, or to make the world better in some way. But notice what Jesus is saying here. It's an extraordinary claim that his quest alone can bring true life. Here's Jesus' claim. He's saying, only my quest is big enough to wake up every aspect of your dormant humanity. Only my quest brings the quality of companionship that you long for with other travelers and ultimately with the living God. Only my quest leads to a destination where your deep desires will be satisfied forever and where you won't find them just angling for more. God, as the Old Testament sage put it, has set eternity in our hearts. Our desires are like homing devices designed to pull us out of our slumber and onto a quest for life with our Creator, of desires satisfied today and one day fulfilled forever. Only Jesus' quest is big enough to do that. And yet, here's the thing. As was famously said, one does not simply walk into Mordor. Much more, one does not simply walk back into relationship with our Creator. Not given where self has taken us. Listen, it was to open the possibility of walking again with God that Jesus died. Jesus' call here in Luke chapter 9 actually comes at a turning point in his own story. From this point onwards in the gospel, Jesus' journey himself will be resolutely towards Jerusalem, to the city in which he knows he'll suffer and be rejected and ultimately be killed. But Jesus embarked upon this path because he knew it was the only way. As the only one who'd never lived for self, Jesus alone had the right to walk in the company of his Father. But because he longed for us to walk alongside them too, Jesus willingly bore the punishment that was rightly ours. Jesus' death is what qualifies us back into the company of our Creator. However we've previously lived for self, whatever that's looked like. Then as he rose on the third day, he signaled that not even self, not even death, will finally stop him from putting this scarred world right again. And what does this mean for our stories? It means this. Jesus' death and resurrection provide you and me with the opportunity of walking again with the living God. That's a journey which begins now. We can find life there now. But because our walking companion is Jesus, and because he is the conqueror of death, it means that this journey doesn't end with death. With Jesus, life stretches into eternity. This is why the Bible is able to close with a picture of our present world renewed as it one day will be by Jesus. At last, it's a place where there's no more crying or mourning or pain. It's a place of joy and utter fulfillment in God. It's a place where our happy ever after is never again threatened. Jesus' resurrection guarantees this reality. And that also reframes life as we walk today. So often I think the things that we're tempted to see as destinations in themselves, whether that's a relationship or achievement or success, turn out to disappoint us or simply make increased demands from us when we have them. Jesus' story reveals that these things were never supposed to be destinations, but merely steps on the way. And similarly, knowing the reality of our future destination equips us even for the hard parts of the journey today. Those parts of life which felt humdrum or pointless before, with Jesus are dignified as meaningful steps. Because our destination is secure, no step on the journey is wasted. It's this conviction that equips followers of Jesus to plod faithfully forward in their own quests, personally, even when it's personally costly. It's energized and fortified countless Christians in small ways and large, including some of those Christians you know. Today, it even inspires people like Denis Mukwege, the Nobel Prize-winning Congolese gynecologist whose own story has led him to contribute so much to medicine and to bravely campaign against rape as a weapon of war, even at great threat to himself. What is it that keeps people like Mukwege on this path? Well, in his words, and as a follower of Jesus, that Jesus cares about every aspect of his creation, and that with Jesus, no effort is ultimately wasted or invalidated by death. We might be tempted, I think, to try and save our lives, to stay at home, to never set out, or merely to embark on a quest that is less demanding than Jesus is. But what Jesus says is they will leave aspects of our humanity untouched. We may think that we're saving our life through ducking Jesus' call. Jesus says, no, to surrender me is to surrender your only hope of true life. You may live a little like a hobbit who never leaves the Shire, but you'll never have life. Not now, not eternally. So how will you respond? Can you hear Jesus' call? Listen, the premise of story is not only that Jesus makes sense of our lives, but that he is the only one who can lead us to true life. Throughout story, that means there'll be plenty of time for honest questions and discussion. Like the best quest stories, you'll find that the journey is better with companions, and there are a whole host who'd love to walk with you. But realize this, as we ask questions of Jesus, we need to realize that Jesus is also posing questions of us. And one particular question, will you follow me? Joining Jesus' quest may seem costly to you, but if Jesus is who he claims to be, then nothing like as costly as ignoring him, and nothing like as costly as an eternity apart from him. So tonight, Jesus says to you, will you join me on my quest? It's a quest which promises life. It's a quest which engages your entire humanity. It's a quest which makes sense of your desires. It's a quest which spills out into your relationships and achievements and ambitions. It's a quest which can redeem every mundane footstep. It's a quest that dignifies our pain. It's a quest which allows us to start living now in a life which can't be ruined by death, and which has the most deeply satisfying conclusion of all. Well, where might you take what you've heard tonight? As I've said, there are some brilliant opportunities to ask questions over this fortnight. There are some thoughtful books that you can request and discussion groups that you can join. You might even appreciate joining a Zoom call that I'll be in along with some others straight after tonight's events. I'd love you to bring your comments, your questions, your experiences, even if they're only half formulated. I promise that you'll be dignified, as will your questions. You may even find that the conversation brings you deeper into the truth. I'd also encourage you to just pop the Christian friend who invited you tonight a message. You might enjoy this challenge to message them with the 3 words that you think best encapsulate your reaction to what you've heard this evening. Just a bit of fun, but it might even help your conversations going forward. There might even be a few here tonight who've been looking into Jesus or Christianity for a while, and you find yourself thinking, do you know what? I think despite the cost, I'm ready to embark upon this quest with Jesus. If that's you, then can I ask you to just let a Christian know? That could be a friend, it could be me in the Zoom call. We'd love to help you to think through some next steps. But before we close tonight, as I'm going to close each of these evenings, I'm going to say a quick prayer. And tonight's prayer is for those who aren't yet ready to follow Jesus, but who nonetheless feel intrigued by what's been said tonight. If that's you, you might appreciate just praying along in the quiet of your heart now. So we pray. Lord Jesus, I'm intrigued by what I've heard tonight. I can see that to be human means embarking on a quest. And I'm wondering if these desires that I have can ultimately only be satisfied on a quest for life with you. And so, Jesus, if you're there, I pray that you would guide me into the truth, that you give me courage to ask my questions. And may this story fortnight help all of us to understand more of what you're like and more of what that could mean for each of us. Amen. Listen, thanks so much for following along tonight. I do hope to see a few of you in the Zoom call shortly. Otherwise, we'll be back here again on Thursday, where we'll consider story plots around overcoming the monster. So I hope to see you then.
We're going to take a moment to reflect on what we just heard as we listen to Anna perform Happiness is a Butterfly by Lana Del Rey.
Do you want me or do you not? I heard one thing, now I'm hearing another. Dropped a pin to my parking spot. The bar was hard, it's 2 a.m. It feels like summer. Happiness is a butterfly. We should catch it like every night. It escapes from my hands into moonlight. Every day is a lullaby. Hum it on the phone like every night. Sing it for my babies on the tour life. If he's a serial killer, then what's the worst that could happen to a girl who's already hurt? I'm already hurt. If he's as bad as they say, then I guess that's worse. Looking into his eyes, think he's already hurt. He's already hurt. I said, don't be a jerk, don't call me a taxi. Sitting in your sweatshirt, crying in the backseat. I just wanna dance with you. Hollywood and fine black rabbit in the alley. I just wanna hold you tight
What a great song. And thank you all for watching. But we're not done yet. We would love to keep the conversation going. Pete, our speaker, and a couple of other students are going to be hanging out on a Zoom call that's live now as this broadcast ends. So if you would like to carry on the conversation, ask questions, or just have a chat about some of the things you've heard tonight, why not head over there? The link can be found in the bio of this event. Alternatively, why not get in touch with a Christian friend, perhaps someone who encouraged you to watch this, and ask them about their own quest. In the talk, we heard Pete drawing on Luke's Gospel. You can head over to our website to find a series of podcasts created by students called the Luke Experiment. In these, you can listen to a dramatic reading of Luke and hear students from different backgrounds and perspectives discussing what they thought of it. Or you could head over to the website storycambridge.uk and click on the Find Out More tab at the top. You can see what else is coming up and let us know if you would like someone to get in touch with you. So that's it for me. Join us on Tuesday, same time, same place, where we'll ask, where is God in our anxiety and pain? We would love to see you there. Thank you again for joining, and we'll see you soon. Bye.